If you could rule the world today, what's the first thing that you would change? Think about your answer. If you could rule the world, what's the first thing you would change? Now, you got an answer? Hold on to that answer. Because that answer is going to reveal how your heart is wired. Jesus' friends, the ones he walked with and talked with and healed with and did all kinds of amazing things with, they had their own answer to that question too. And today we discover how all of us, going back 2,000 years, all the way back to the garden, all of us had the same problem. Today we're going to continue going through the book of Luke. We're in Luke chapter 22. The setting is the Last Supper, the night before Jesus is arrested and put on trial and crucified. An intimate dinner. It's a celebration of God's faithfulness, the Passover, when the people of Israel were freed from bondage. This is Jesus speaking. But behold, the hand of him who betrays me is with me on the table. For the Son of Man goes as it has been determined. But woe to the man by whom he is betrayed. And they began to question one another. Which of them it could be who's going to do this? A dispute arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles, they exercise lordship over them. And those in authority over them are called benefactors, but not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become the youngest, and the leader as one who serves. But who is the greater, one who reclines at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at the table? But I am among you as the one who serves. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So picture this room. It's Passover, 13 men crammed into a small upper room. The air's thick with incense, the smell of roasted lamb, the smell of anticipation, flickering oil lamps, casting long shadows on the walls. Speed stick by Menon was going to be invented about 2,000 years later. So you can imagine what these 13 big burly men smelled like in this little tiny room. Probably not pleasant. But this is the meal. This is the meal, the banquet that God has been cooking since Moses split the Red Sea. The Passover, a meal of remembrance that looked back at God's faithfulness, but also kind of had an eye looking forward to his coming faithfulness as well, because God was not done with his plan of redemption back when he freed his covenant family, Israel, from slavery. He has a lot more that he's going to do. And so these aren't random dudes. They are brothers. They are ride or die. Is that, did I use that appropriately? Anyone know how to use that phrase? What is that, Fast and Furious? I've never seen a single Fast and Furious. There's like 30 Fast and Furious films. I've yet to see one. They were tight. They were ride or die. They had walked with Jesus. They had seen all these things happen. They walked miles with him. They saw him shut down storms. They fed thousands of people with one kid's lunch. They saw Jesus yank Lazarus from death to life. So theologically speaking, this meal here, it's like the most impactful meal in all of human history. It's a banquet before the sacrifice that was thousands of years in the making. It's a sacred moment here that Jesus makes this jarring announcement that ought to get people's attention. He says, but behold, the hand of him who betrays me is on the table. That's a big bomb. I imagine silence. They were tight, ride or die. We are loyal to one another. Judas freezes with bread halfway in his mouth. Peter mutters, it's not me. Thomas is squinting at John. Are you the one? Heart's got to be pounding. One of these guys we've shared everything with is about to stab Jesus in the back. Jesus says, woe to that man. This is a heavy moment. You'd think this would freak them out. Who's the snake? We got to figure this out. Let's not talk about anything else. Who's the one who's going to rat out Jesus? Is that what happened next? No. Next verse. A dispute arose among them as to which one of them was to be regarded as the greatest. Really, guys? Really? Jesus says, one of you is going to sell me out. And they all start flexing. Hey, all right, so if Judas is out of the picture, that means I get to go up one rung on the ladder. Pretty awful. Peter's probably chest out, right? Yeah, all right, one less competing for Jesus' right hand. All right, cool. James and John, I imagine they're thinking about their thrones already. In the middle of betrayal, they're daydreaming about their robes and all the servants they're going to have. Really, guys, I imagine Jesus doing one of those face palms. I wouldn't blame him. And even as this pivotal moment, even here, Jesus, he's about to face betrayal. He's about to face crucifixion. And they're concerned with their status and their power and their position. Yet instead of berating them, he graciously educates them on what true power is. This moment, these guys, you don't get any more human than this. And it creates the perfect backdrop for Jesus to now redefine what leadership truly looks like in his kingdom. So we get a picture of how it's supposed to be. It says, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them. Those in authority over them are called benefactors. It's not supposed to be that way with you. Instead, let the greatest among you become the youngest, and the leader as the one who serves. For who is the greater, one who reclines at the table or one who serves? Jesus isn't just suggesting some sort of leadership hack here. He's introducing a complete inversion of how power is used in this world. In Jesus' kingdom, greatness is not measured by who has the most servants, but by who serves the most. Jesus didn't just model service for us. His entire mission was a sacrificial act of service. Mark 10:45 says, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. His leadership wasn't just an example. His leadership, his service was an expression of the gospel itself. Tangible, real. And his sacrifice on the cross, it fulfilled what prophets said centuries earlier. Isaiah chapter 53, one of the prophets, hundreds of years prior, speaks about the suffering servant who would bear our sins. Zechariah 9, verse 9, it talks specifically about a humble king who would ride in on a donkey, not on a war horse, as kings are supposed to do. These weren't just random predictions from hundreds of years prior. They were pointing specifically to Jesus and his upside-down way of leadership. But we do not like this. We do not like it. We do not get it. We certainly don't follow it. So how do we get it wrong? The disciples here, they're arguing about who's going to be great. Who's going to be great? It wasn't just like a minor squabble, this disagreement among them. What it says is that all of humanity, all of us, our default understanding of power and leadership is jacked up. So we all laugh at them. Jesus says, hey, there's a snake among you. And instead of them saying, whoa, wait, this is terrible, stop it, they say, all right, so when you get into your kingdom, I wonder who's going to... Okay, that's just weird. We laugh at them when they do that, but they represent us. If we read this story and we look ourselves into the story, we're those disciples. We're right there with them, wearing their smelly sandals. We would ask the same things they would ask, because they were products of their culture. They were surrounded by examples of leadership that looked like, well, let's go back in time 2,000 years. We had Roman governors who came in, who ruled the land with military might, Roman centurions everywhere. The mightiest army in the world, the greatest empire that's ever lived in the Western world, Rome, came into Palestine and they rule with military might. Pilate, he shows up and he starts taxing people into oblivion. People had this oppressive tax system. Religious authorities, the super holy religious guys who knew all the rules, they were leveraging status for privilege. They liked that people were looking up to them. They enjoyed having the authority. They enjoyed ruling over people. And the systems of the world where, you've ever heard this, might makes right. That was the rule of the day for these disciples. So this model of leadership that we're talking about here, it's not just for those disciples. It runs throughout human history. The strong win. The weak lose. You ever hear the phrase, survival of the... Okay? This is hardwired into us. That pattern remains consistent. Leaders take. They demand. They elevate themselves at the expense of others. This is ancient pharaohs all the way to modern CEOs, cashing million-dollar bonus checks while their little people can't even find a place that they can afford to live in. Okay? It's still happening today. For the disciples, they had plenty of that sort of thing in Israel's own history to look back on. They had these patterns that they could see. The people demanded a king. Their king was God. They demanded a king. We want a king. Give us a king, just like all these other nations around us. God's like, you don't want a king. No, I know, you're great. We want a king. We want a king. Okay, fine. Samuel, the prophet, comes to them and says, look, kings take... Kings will crush. Kings demand. You don't want a king. They said, no, we want a king. Okay, fine. God has a way of giving us over to the things that our hearts desire, so he gave us a king. Saul started out in the right way. Things went sideways. David, a man after God's own heart, started out humble. Things got a little complicated, didn't they? If you're not familiar with David's story, look it up. His son Solomon, he began with wisdom. But he ended up succumbing to excess and died in apostasy. All those kings, those subsequent kings of Israel, they stand as sort of a cautionary tale for us of the power of corruption and of the way that power corrupts absolutely, right? God was right. Power corrupts. And when you keep it for yourself, it tends to corrupt absolutely. The power that those kings were given were meant to help those that they served and ruled over. That Israel would be a light to the nations to draw all people to Yahweh God. But instead, they used their power for themselves. And the prophets were not silent about this. God gave his covenant people, Israel, prophets to speak on behalf of him. And these prophets consistently, they challenged all these royal abuses. They would speak the truth to power. And the people didn't want to hear it. The king did not want to hear it. Listen to the words of the prophet Micah. This is Micah chapter 6, verse 8. He says, God has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Mortal. Are you mortal? Are you going to stop breathing someday? Yep. So God's talking to you. This isn't just a word to Israel. This isn't a word just to God's covenant people. This isn't a word just to the church. This is a word to all humans. What is required of you, O human? To act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly. That is what's required of you, including kings. God expects us to walk humbly, even those in power. Those are the values of his kingdom. Micah 6:8 is not just a suggestion, it's a divine command that Israel's leaders often ignored. And I got to be honest, we still wrestle with it today, don't we? Even in church, even in our own hearts. Remember when I asked the question? If you had complete control to rule the world right now, what's the first thing you would change? What did you think about? Was it the good of others? Or was it something that maybe relates to you? Okay, we have the same disease in our heart, and the church is not exempt. Look at these silly TV preachers asking for a $1,000 donation so that, trying to get $1,000 from some poor little old lady watching TV so they can get their own personal angel. In Jesus' kingdom, a rich, wealthy TV preacher is sending $1,000 to the little old ladies, not trying to squeeze the poor for all the money. Even in the church, we've got this thing upside down. Well, what are you, a Marxist, Chris? What do you have against me? No, if we have money, if we have power, it's meant to be used for the good of those around us, especially the most vulnerable, especially the poor and the hurting. That's not Marxism, that's Jesus. Some of us think being a servant leader, though, might mean being a doormat, letting people walk all over you. Jesus wasn't weak when he served. He was displaying the greatest strength the world has ever known. He could have wiped us out at any moment on that cross. He saw us at our worst. He could have called out an army of angels to wipe us out. What, burn it down? He could do whatever he wanted. He's God. But instead, he looked out at us and said, Father, forgive them. They're mine. I see them at the worst. I see the warts, and I'm still going to buy. They're mine. He wasn't weak. He's not a doormat. He had great power under control. That's what it's like in his kingdom. Look at how this quote, Pastor Thabiti says it this way. In a world full of people who would argue for their own greatness based on age or class or privilege or race or gender, education, and almost anything else, the Lord shines bright as the one who forsakes all those prejudices and gives his life for others. The Lord turns the entire world upside down with his emphasis on service. So how did Jesus get it right? How does Jesus serve us? He says, but I am among you as the one who serves. Jesus doesn't just teach us servant leadership. He embodies servant leadership at a cost we can barely comprehend. Look at this setting again, okay? Jesus knows what's coming. He knows what lies ahead of him as he eats this meal with these men in that cramped room with all the smells. He knows what's coming. He knows someone's going to betray him, and he knows it's going to lead to him going to a cross. Within a couple hours, he's going to be arrested, beaten, mocked, and crucified. He knows that Judas is going to betray him. He knows Peter will deny him 3 times. He knows all of his disciples are going to scatter and run. And still, he kneels down and he washes their feet. Does that blow your mind? He knows that these people are going to let him down and betray him. And still, he gets the wash basin out, he gets the towel, and he washes their feet. These are commercial fishermen. They didn't have socks. They didn't have these nice work boots. Their feet had to be pretty amazingly awful when it comes to smell. And their toenails, I can only imagine. I've seen some of your toenails. Imagine theirs. Okay, oh. Does that gross him out? He says, no, I'm going to wash your feet. Jesus served. I among you, the one who serves. In this world, the king doesn't bow down before the servants. In this world, you bow down before the king. You wash the king's feet. You kiss the ring. Jesus demonstrates how his kingdom is completely different than that. He still kneels before those who will betray him. And he washes their feet. And he says, unless you let me wash you, you can have no part in me. You get that? If you want a relationship with Jesus, you have to let the king wash you. Jesus shows us what real leadership looks like. What it looks like to have power. So this night, hours from getting spikes through his hands and feet, he's grabbing a towel, he washes Peter's nasty feet. He says, I am your servant. Compare that to Herod. Herod's palace full of servants. doting on him, marble everywhere. The works, just beautiful. Jesus does things differently, though. Look at his response when Simon Peter, one dude. If you see Simon and Peter, it's just one dude, Peter. Look what he says when he does deny Jesus. He says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you that he might sift you like wheat. Sifting wheat, you shake it really hard for the wheat to come out. Satan was going to do that to you, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you turned again, strengthen your brothers. So this is the heart of Jesus sort of laid out there for everybody to see. Even facing betrayal, even facing death, he intercedes for the one who will deny him, Peter. That means we have an enemy who's trying to trip us up, and Jesus is praying for us, even when he knows we're going to deny him. Peter was going to deny him 3 times, and he prays for Peter. He believes that Peter's going to be restored, and that Peter would come back and strengthen his brothers. That means he believes in Peter when Peter doesn't believe in himself. What grace! Jesus gives Peter a future and a purpose beyond his failure. It's not like Peter got anything right in this passage. That's called grace. What did Jesus get in return for this radical act of service, both washing the feet and loving and serving and going all the way to the cross? What did he get in return for his perfect life of obedience and service? He got abandoned, denied, betrayed, and he died on a Roman cross. He didn't even get a t-shirt for his day of service. He didn't get a tax deduction for his donation. This servant leadership. When you strip away all the romance and the glamour, you can see it's raw, it is bloody, and it is costly. That's the model Jesus gives us for how we are to live as his people. This upside down economy of God's kingdom means the more we give away, especially to the poor, especially the most vulnerable, the more we receive. Not in a worldly currency, but in heaven. We store up treasures in heaven forever. And then in this life, the more we surrender, the more we actually gain. The more we serve, the more intimately we know our servant king. Our prize is not some sort of fleeting appreciation of those that we serve. We don't do it for that, a pat on the back. We do it because it's an example of our eternal union with Jesus. Because our prize for serving this way is Jesus himself. Now and forever, a reconciled relationship with God. We get to be with Jesus. Jesus himself is our prize. So how do we respond to that? We got to do something with that. How do we respond? What does servant leadership look like today, right now, in 2025 in Wyoming, Michigan? It isn't weakness, we know that. It's strength redirected. It's power used not for personal gain, but for others' transformation. It's sacrificial. It costs us greatly. What does that look like? Well, remember, Jesus did in this upper room, right? He gathered for what would be their final meal together. Jesus, their teacher, their Lord, took off his outer garments, wrapped a towel around his waist, knelt before each disciple, and washed their dirty feet from those dusty roads that had animal junk in it, and had calloused heels. He's cleaning between the toes. Think about that scene. This is the king of the universe, the creator of the universe, kneeling and serving, cleaning their feet. Think about the words Jesus shared before they ate. Remember Ross's message last week. This is my body given for you. His entire life is culminating in this stunning display of service, pointing to this ultimate service that he's going to render on the cross just a few hours later. This is our model. It's not just some nice story, it's our blueprint for how we are to live. If you have power, whether it's in your family, whether it's in your workplace, whether it's in the community, ask God how it can be used to serve those in need, the most vulnerable. Power in God's kingdom isn't for self-protection or self-promotion. It's for lifting up those who have no power on their own. If you have money, ask God, how can it be used for the good of those around you, especially the poor, especially the most vulnerable? Your resources are not ultimately yours. They're entrusted to you. You are stewards for the building up of God's kingdom. We pray that. May your kingdom come here on earth just as much as it is in heaven. How do you think that happens? Do little pixies fly around with their magic wand and just go, bing, kingdom of heaven is bursting in? No, God works through a people, the church, those who have been reconciled by Jesus. You get this opportunity to serve as his hands and his feet in this world. So anything that you have actually belongs to him, to be used for his kingdom as a blessing to others. Do you have a talent? Do you have passion? Do you have an interest? How can God put that to use for his kingdom? In this room here, within Buck Creek, where you can serve, just ask me. There are hundreds of ways you can serve. Hundreds of ways. You don't have to look further than this, your local church, friends. I got lots of ideas. But here's the thing. Once you do it, you're not doing it for a pat on the back. Because this service we get to do, see what I just said? This service we get to do, you don't have to do it. There's no earning involved. Jesus paid it all. Ever hear that song? It's true. Jesus paid it all. That means there's no earning involved. You're not doing these good things to get favor from God. You already have favor from God in Jesus Christ. If you've been reconciled to the Father through Jesus' work, if you've been reconciled to one another through Jesus' work, that means you get to do these good deeds. You get to serve. Don't ever think that you gain favor from Jesus for doing these things. You do these things because you have favor from Jesus. Amen? On the cross, we see this thing called the great exchange. Our sins traded for his infinite riches. His blood for our forgiveness. His broken body so we could be reconciled to God and one another. I mean, sacrificial service done in his name. It's the very expression of the gospel itself. You don't have the words to say? I can help you with that. You definitely have the ability to demonstrate its power by living a life this way. It's a life that is so different from this world. Because of the way the world is structured and the power that operates in this world, you got the big bully at school. You got the big boss person at work. There's always somebody big, mean guy. In this world, it's not the way it's supposed to be. Jesus comes and we say, may your kingdom come on earth just as much as it is in heaven. And when his kingdom starts to break in, then we start to erode the way this world works. We get to show what true power and greatness looks like. And when we do that, it's an expression of the truth of the gospel. In practice, this means washing the metaphorical feet of the messy, the unglamorous work, the stuff that, the dirty stuff that people aren't going to line up to do. That's what Christians do. We line up to do that. That's our history. Where do you think the idea of a hospital came from, guys? Where does the idea of a hospital come from? The church. The church saw the sick and the ailing, and they started caring for them. And they started getting people together and training people medically, and then they turned into a building. Hospitals came from the church. Where does this idea of general education of the populace, where did that come from? The church. Where did people start to meet, to learn? And where was the school? Where did it take place? In the church buildings. The idea of orphan care. It was thought that if you were not wanted, that you could just be cast off behind the temple and the animals would take care of it. The church went up there and took those babies and raised them as their own. The idea of orphan care and foster care. Who came up with the idea of foster care? The church. Immigration resettlement. The church. That is our legacy. That's who we are. That's what we do. So washing those metaphorical feet, that's what it looks like. Continuing that legacy of doing the work that nobody wants to do, that society doesn't want to do. That's what we get to do. Do you see that? Because Jesus went to those hard places, those messy places, the places we would not choose on our own to go. That's where Jesus is. And our mission here is to help you find and follow him. that means we need to go to those places where there's hurt, where there's pain, where there's brokenness. We get to do that. We get to look for those who've been overlooked, forgotten, or dismissed. What does that look like? Think about school. Anybody here in school still with a lunchroom? I got 2 guys, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, cool. All right, so if you go to school, you go in the lunchroom, you know there's a table where the cool kids are. Am I right? And then there's the other tables. There's always somebody who does not fit in. You all know the kids who are kind of weird, who don't quite fit in. In God's kingdom, instead of bullying them, instead of making fun of them, instead of laughing at them, because if they're laughing at him, he's not laughing at me, so I'm going to laugh at him too. Instead of doing that, we go to the person who feels overlooked and forgotten. We say, hey, I'm Chris. Can I sit here? Do it once a week. Do it every day. That's what Christian people do. That's what it looks like to live out this idea of servant leadership. Instead of saying, hey, I'm the cool kid, I'm going to be over here, and everyone's going to want to sit by me, you say, who's the kid who doesn't fit in? Who needs a friend? Let me be their friend. These are just ideas. I'm not giving you a bunch of to-do list here. God knows what you need to do, what it looks like in your life. But my guess is it's going to mean you sacrificing comfort, convenience, recognition for the good of others. So our response to Jesus' call to be a servant leader, it should mirror what we heard about in Micah 6:8. To act justly in our dealings, to love mercy towards those who are hurting, to walk humbly with our God in all we do. All the more if we have great power, great wealth, great resources. To quote Peter Parker's uncle, Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. It's true. It's not just for Spider-Man, that's for Christians. It's true. So now here's the thing. My last thought here, guys. What we don't do is volunteer. We don't volunteer. Let's not say that. I know it slips in every once in a while. Let's not say that. In the church, we don't volunteer. If you're a member of Buck Creek, you contribute to our ministry here through many ways. You serve. We serve. Jesus served us. We get to serve others. We don't volunteer. We don't do our day of service so we can get a free t-shirt. We serve. What's required of you, oh man? The basics are that you do the good stuff. You're supposed to do that stuff. That's what we do. That's the basics of serving, of seeing your role and going above and beyond to contribute for the good of this church. In order to be good news to this church and to this community, you serve. You don't get extra credit for that. Those are the basics. How often do we think of our time as volunteering, and I did a really good thing, and they better thank me for it, darn it. And if I don't get recognized, I'm going to get my neck all stiff, and I'm going to be angry, and I might not serve again next time. Look at what Jesus did. He knelt before the people who would betray him and washed their feet. Spiritually, he washes us clean because of his work on a cross. What thanks did he get? He was abandoned and betrayed. What makes you think you're supposed to get a t-shirt? You don't do it for the pat on the back. Your treasure's being stored up in heaven. Those are the basics of what it means to be a Christian who's been saved from death to life. You are a new creation in Christ. You were dead and now you're alive forever. Of course, anything that's mine belongs to him. How can I use it? Sacrificially. That's what a sacrifice is. It costs you something to give it. If you can just afford to drop it in, it's not a sacrifice. That's charity. Jesus isn't about charity. Jesus isn't about volunteering. Jesus is about sacrifice. It requires us rearranging our life in order to make the sacrifice happen. Does that make sense? If you could just pull it off the top, that's called charity. It doesn't cost you anything to give it. If you try to fit your church time in, I'll do that when I have time. That's not sacrifice. That's charity. That's volunteering. In God's kingdom, there's no fitting stuff. It's people serving because they have been served by the one who put on a towel around his waist and washed our feet. That's what we get to do. So, friends, the way of servant leadership, I think you see it's not easy, is it? Jesus doesn't call us to a life of easy, of doing things when we have time. Jesus says, I own you. I've served you. And now you get to serve others. That's what we get to do. So, friends, how are we going to follow his example? Would you pray with me?